Hi, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog, and it's that time of year again. Hunter and I are here to talk about the National Book Award. Welcome back, Hunter.
Thanks for having me.
This is one of my favorite things that I do every year, have Hunter on my channel as we dissect the National Book Award. This is the fourth year in a row we've done this, I think. And every year we have very, very fun conversations and diverse opinions.
Yeah.
um, and this year, I think it's going to be another one of those years where we have a lot to say.
Oh, yeah. I've had a lot to say, and I've gotten like a lot of DMs from people being like, "I know you have a lot of thoughts. What are those thoughts?" But I've been trying to like save them up because like I assumed we'd be doing this, so I was like, I'll try to hold back.
Well, I love that you saved it for us. So, as you all know, the National Book Award has 5 awards, but we're only going to be talking about fiction today. I do love that it's only a long list of 10 books because I always feel that's much more doable than some of the other long lists out there. And we have like 4 weeks or so to read a long list. So let's get started just with some initial thoughts, Hunter. When this list came out, what was the first thing that sort of popped into your head?
So I just remember seeing the image of the 10 books and seeing that The Bastard Wilds did not make the list. Lauren Groff's latest novel, that Jesmyn Ward's Let Us Descend did not make the list. And I saw those 2 books were not on there. My first thought was, oh, they're doing something different. Okay.
Hunter and I talked right before we started this video. The Bastard Wilds by Groff and Jesmyn Ward's book hasn't been released yet, but it's shortlisted for the Kirkus Prize. And again, the reviews are stellar. Ward is a 2-time winner. Groff is a 3-time finalist with some of their best work out there. So it was a little surprising not to see them on the list. To be honest, I had them like penciled in. I was just so certain.
They definitely seemed like locks. And it's so funny. I think in a year that has had so many strong works by, really big names. We had, James McBride, Colson Whitehead. We had Andrea Barrett had a new short story collection out. Like all these people who had won before, been finalists before. Been a finalist for the Pulitzer or won the Pulitzer. Like all these people were on these things. And I'm like, why? I don't know. Could you imagine having a year that had so many big names? That could have been along sprinkled in with some debut people. I'm here for it all. But I'm very surprised.
Yes. I actually was really hoping McBride's book would make the list because I really, really want to read it. And I was like, okay, it will make the list and I'll be able to read it. I'm a huge Colson Whitehead fan, but I did not love the last book, Harlem Shuffle. So I wasn't that thrilled about this one. I do think he's one of our greatest writers. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, you're right. It is a year. I mean, Russo had a book out, like there's people, big names, but that aside, we have our 10 books to read. I will say I've gone through them all. I've read 4 of them. There is a very, very heavy historical fiction sort of feel to this list, which I thought was really interesting. And if they're not historical fiction, they're sort of more experimental in nature a little bit.
Which, let me just say, I love how historical fiction and both Groff and Ward's books are historical fiction. What is going on?
100%. So yeah, no. And I think we could do a whole video on Groff's book. I haven't read Ward's book all the way. I started it right before the list came out. And I'm like, since it didn't make the list, I'm going to pause and I'll get back to it. But Groff's book is hands down her best book of the year. But the best book of her career. I'm sorry. So, okay. Well, let's get started. We're going to talk about these books, the 10 books in alphabetical order by author's last name and go through there. I will say that the first book that's on this list, which is Chain Gang AllStars by Kwame and Adjei-Brenyah out from Pantheon. I actually expected this to make the list too. I did think that this is his first novel. He had a short story collection, Black Friday out, which was very, very well received. I think he was a National Book Award 5 under 35 winner, wasn't he?
I think so.
And this book is a sort of dystopian dismantling of the prison system in America, where it's turned into
Mm-hmm.
sort of a gladiator type system. When I finished this book, I was amazed because at the heart of it is a lesbian love story. That's what's
Mm-hmm.
at the heart of this book, and I was really surprised by that. And they do like these satires.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
This
we talked about it a little bit. What are your thoughts about this one making the list?
So I first I want to say that I think the author is very attractive. Uh
Agreed.
I mean, so I feel like I have a bias in that way, but I listened to this and I told you I listened to it and I wasn't a huge fan of the audiobook, but I plan on but I'm going to reread it, the physical copy, because I just want to be able to really appreciate it without another voice kind of like putting like I want to just be able to like read it as it is, because I think that'll make a difference. But I liked it. The audiobook I think kind of like hindered some of my enjoyment. So like that's kind of how I felt a little bit on it. I don't think it's a bad book. I'm excited to see it. There are some people who liked the book who the people who liked it I find annoying. And so when some people like a book that and I'm like, oh, you're annoying. I don't know if I like, like I listen, I have admitted this in the past too. This is one of my flaws as a human being. So it's fine.
Yeah, I will say that I thought this book definitely, I read this before it came out, and it came out in like February. So it's like one
Uh-huh.
of the first books I read in 2023, and it has stuck with me. So I
Yeah.
definitely feel like, I mean, I do hate that when I ordered it, it came with the read with Jenna sticker. Makes me
Uh-huh.
so angry. On the cover, cannot take it off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a book that could be classified as something so specific has many, many layers. And I do think that this is a little bit more accessible than some of the other books on the list. So I'm excited to see it there.
Yeah, and I also think he has a really strong voice on the page. And that feels very
Yeah.
like National Book Award to me. I feel like they love the kind of really voicey stuff a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have some friends who saw him live in person at the South Carolina Literary Festival,
Okay.
and they said he was charming
Mm-hmm.
and amazing, and they were all like fans from seeing him. And that was after Black Friday. So I'm
Yeah.
excited. I think it's a different type of book, so I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really cool. Yeah, so that's what kicks us off. What's next on the list?
Is it okay? Yeah.
I think it's this one. Do you have
Yeah.
this one yet?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So Temple Folk, is it Aaliyah?
Yeah.
Bilal? Aaliyah
Aaliyah.
Bilal?
I think so.
I had never heard of this story collection. How about you?
No, I had not either. And so I do love I haven't read it yet, but I do love a debut collection. Because I don't know, I feel like that's kind of where like a lot of writers cut their teeth is on like the short
Uh-huh.
stories they write whenever they're in school. And so I always think that's kind of fun to see like the beginnings of what their work is and what they're interested in.
Yeah, so because Hunter and I hadn't heard of this one, let me just read the little beginning of the blurb for everyone. It just says, Black Muslims contemplate the convictions of their race, religion, economics, politics, and sexuality in the United States. The 10 stories in this collection contribute to the bounty of diverse narratives about Black life by intimately portraying the experiences of a community that resists the mainstream American culture they're pushed to aspire to and accept, which I think sounds amazing. And I mean, it's blurred by Edward P. Jones, Pulitzer,
Mm-hmm.
Disha, who wrote The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, who, by the way, just got a huge book deal for her
Yeah.
next two books, who I loved The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, Angela Flournoy, who is phenomenal, and Marlon James. So there are some big names blurbing this collection.
Yeah, and I'm actually it sounds like it could kind of read similarly to Disha Filial's The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, just in like the themes and subject matter a little bit. Which I'm very intrigued by that possibility.
Yeah. Well, and you know what else? It really reminds me of some of the short story collections that were on last year's list.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of fits into that feel a lot. And I liked a lot of those. I don't read a ton of short story collections over the year, but I do think that this one sounds pretty amazing. So good for Simon and Schuster getting Temple Folk, and congratulations to Aaliyah Bilal, because I had never heard of this book at all before it made this. So I think we both started the next book on this list. So the next book, is Ponyboy by Eliot Duncan. You want to give a quick summary of this one?
I don't know enough to because I don't read books for anyone who doesn't know, I don't read what books are about before I start them. So I pretty much just know that this kid got a haircut and is like in Europe.
So the main character is Ponyboy, a trans man who, at the start of the book, he is in France, sort of trying to figure out himself is what's going on. He has a girlfriend named Baby, and as he's trying to figure out who he is, she's trying to make him into who she wants him to be, and he gets very much into the drug culture. He's in school, but winds up going from Paris to Berlin, gets even more involved in drug culture, art culture, and then he winds up overdosing and winds up back in Iowa, where his family's from. So I am really excited. You are my National Book Award encyclopedia. Have we ever had a book with a trans character as the main character on a long list?
No, not as a main character. There's been like little, but
yeah. So it's really exciting to see part of our culture or part of our community getting noticed in a different way. I've just started it, so I have like no real opinion on it. But I believe this is one of those books that has been in the bookstore. I've almost bought it 100 times.
Yeah. It's actually funny because my friend Bernie Lombardi, who you know, he sent me a picture of it whenever he was working at the bookstore one day, 2 or 3 months ago, and was like, "Oh, this looks great." And I was like, "Oh, it does." And then for my birthday, I saw it in the bookstore and was like, "I'm gonna get it for myself." And then I didn't read it. And now I'm like, it was like one of those things where I was like, "Oh, good, one less book to buy for the list."
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, Bernie also had talked about how he had almost bought it a number of times as well. So this book had been out there. I had seen it, but I'm really actually quite excited to get to it and read it and see this new voice. So
yeah, no, I'm excited.
The next book actually on the list is the book that's probably gotten the most talk of this list, because The Other Eden by Paul Harding is also on the Booker long list. And this is out Norton, 2 Norton books in a row, actually. That's interesting. And Paul Harding won the Pulitzer for Tinkers quite a while ago, actually. I feel like I was quite young when he won the Pulitzer. 2010. So 13 years ago. And this book is historical fiction, which is a theme we're going to talk about as we go through the rest of this list a little bit. But it's about an island off the coast of Maine that was originally founded, and it was like the first, what does it say? An isolated island that became the first racially integrated town in the Northwest. And that started in like the late 1700s. And then 1912, a teacher, of course, a missionary arrives, and of course they decide everything has to change, and they remove a lot of the people from the island. So you've gotten through a big portion of this one.
I got through some of it. But it was a while back when I bought this book when Bernie, it's so funny. It seems like a constant. Bernie he came to visit back in January, and he was like, he just handed it to me at the bookstore and was like, "Get it." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "It's going to be a big book, I think." He's like very good at he's like a little like a witch sometimes, where he can just like pluck them out and figure it. He's better at it than I am. But I used to think I was really skilled at it. But anyway, and I like what I've read. But I also know that this is one that seemed a little bit divisive, and people have had varying opinions on it. And it kind of when it starts to get into that way, I have a hard time figuring out what I think based versus what I'm hearing a lot of. And so I try to wait until that dies down a little bit so I can really think about what I think, and then let other people's opinions and what their knowledge of these things kind of help me inform myself, and
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think sometimes I hear so much about a book that I'll start reading it, and if people that I respect don't like it, I automatically start from a space of not enjoying it,
yeah.
because I respect those opinions. So, and this is one of those books that everybody's been talking about, which
Hmm.
I am not the one to go for the book that everybody's talking about. It's
Yeah.
not my jam. So I have sort of put it off. I'm excited to read it. I love the premise of it all.
Hmm.
And I read Tinkers so long ago, I can't remember anything about it. And I remember liking it. So I'm interested to see what he's doing now.
Yeah, I've heard I know that some people who I respect and admire as readers did really enjoy it. Felt that it was a little bit inaccessible at times, but that it was well written. And yeah, so I'm the premise does intrigue me, what I know of it. So
Yeah. I think for me, I've heard that like it's one of those books that builds. So sometimes you have to really wait till you turn the last page to make an opinion on a book, and I think that this
mhm.
may be one of them. So, keeping with that historical fiction narrative, as far as books on this list, I will be honest with you. I have read the next book, and I
Okay.
read it some time ago, and that's Loot.
Okay.
Um, is it Tania?
I don't know actually. I didn't that was one I did not look up to
Oh,
see.
I'm yeah, Tania James. This is out from Knopf. And when I read it, I really liked it, but I
Okay.
would never have thought of this as a National Book Award book.
Okay.
One, it takes place in like 18th, 17th century um India or 18th
Hmm.
century. It's like it's very historical fiction,
Yeah.
but it's about a boss who is a young boy who is very good with woodworking, who is taken from his family to the Sultan's castle to work with a very famous
Hmm.
French watchmaker to build an automaton, which is basically like a working statue. And
Hmm.
we follow a boss's life as Britain comes in to India, sort of conquers the continent or the country. Sorry, don't get me for saying continent. I meant country. And I've gotten that in the past where I make slips like that and I hear about it. So the country of India, and a boss winds up on a ship trying to get to France because he wants to find the watchmaker and start his life all over again.
Hmm.
Um, I really enjoyed it. If you like, it is like quintessential historical fiction. So if you really like that, it does some interesting things where it changes from the standard narrative to epistolary in the middle.
Hmm.
And I say epistolary, it's almost like a diary, but the diary writer is clearly writing it to someone.
Hmm.
I learned a ton about Indian history that
Yeah.
I had no knowledge of, which was really good. And the characters are really quite good. I never thought of it as a National Book Award possibility, so it's kind of
Yeah.
exciting.
I did not know anything about it, but based on the cover, I did think this is my thing too. It's so funny. Bernie makes fun of me all the time because I'm always like, "Oh yeah," like he's like, "Oh, have you heard about it?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I like the cover." And he's like, "Read what it's about, please." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. I'm just gonna pick it up. It's fine." And but yeah, from the cover, I was like, "Oh, this could be an NBA book." And so like it's funny that you were like, "Oh, does it?" Because like I like not knowing what it's about, I was like, "It looks like it could be in the list."
I don't know. I was trying to think. I mean, I've only really been like deep in the National Book Award maybe for like the last 10 years, not like you reading all these past lists and all that. Um, but this year it feels like the most heavy historical fiction outside of the US
Hmm.
that I can think of in a long time. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's true.
So, and I mean, we're going to continue because this next book, Night Watch by
That's right.
Jayne and Phillips, is
Hmm.
also very much historical fiction. Um, it's so funny. Knopf sent me this. Thank you, Knopf. They actually sent me two copies in two different packages on the same exact day.
Oh,
I was
interesting.
like, okay, well, thanks. But then it wound up on the list, and I was just like, well, that's fortuitous for me. A book I don't have to buy. But this takes place right after the Civil War, and it's about a mother and daughter. The mother is being put into a mental health facility. It's called the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia, by a soldier who sort of arrives after the war and just sort of integrates himself into this family. And it's the story of this mother and daughter trying to refigure out their life. I have had Lark and Termite on my shelf for years.
Yeah.
And so have you read anything by her before?
No, but I also have Lark and Termite because it's coming up for my newsletter to discuss. But I also, one of her book, her short story collection, the one titled oh gosh, hold on, it's gonna drive me crazy if I don't tell you. I can't remember. Oh wait, I just grabbed the wrong book. I just grabbed Loot. I was like, why can't I find it? Black Tickets. Black Tickets is one that Alexander Chi said I should read. And so I have that one, and now I have to read it because he told me to. But no, so I haven't read her, but I've heard really great things about her previous work.
Yeah, and so the blurb says that this is actually the third in her trilogy of war novels. And I don't think they connect. I just think that they are all different wars where she experiences that. But I am excited about this one. I think that it sounds really interesting. I love when authors like take a specific part of cultural history and sort of dive into it. But yeah, so that's Night Watch, Jayne Ann Phillips, and I mean this just came out like now. So I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It is just funny, like talking about like historical fiction books. I'm telling you, I'm gonna be bitter about the fact that like I'm like, oh, these other historical fiction books. Hey, is James McBride? Does that one take place? Do we know?
I think it's historical. I think it takes place in like the 70s. I guess that's historical in a manner. Yeah.
It's yeah, we'll see. Yeah. So see, like it's so what are they doing? I don't know. It's fine. Anyway.
Yeah, no. So the next book, you know, again, the next two books that are on this list are two books that I had never heard of at all. And so this one, A Council of Dolls by Mona Susan Power. I do love the cover. Don't let me tell you. And this is about the Dakota people in America. Have you heard of this or this author before?
I heard, it's so funny. What is his name? I think it's J.C. Grant. I believe I could be wrong. And a bookstore grammar who happened to have a copy, and just mentioned it like offhandedly, and I kind of just was like, oh, like I added it to my list, but as just like a thing to think about, not something to pursue immediately. And now I'm like, I wish I had. But yeah, so I had heard a little bit.
I do know that this is the story of three Dakota women in a family, and it's told in reverse historical order. So I think the first one is like in the 60s, and then and then 1925, and then 1888. And it's told through the point of view of, in a way, through the point of view of the dolls that they own while they go through this. So it has to do with the Indian experience in America, and focusing on this lineage of Dakota women. I'm interested. I'm very interested to see what it is. Had never heard of it. I do like Mariner a lot, who is the publisher. And they don't get a lot of books on lists like this. So I was really excited about that. But yeah, no, I know nothing about this one. So
I'm excited. This is one of those things, this is one of those moments where because I don't know a lot about it, and because it really is one of the ones that I had not heard anything about, aside from like small rumblings. Like I think I felt the same way about Blacklight that came out in 2018.
Oh, I love Blacklight.
Yeah, and like there's little books like that, or like Abundance, which I had mixed feelings on, but Abundance was one that I'd seen little sprinklings of. And so I like whenever something is like, I had heard about it, but it was so under the radar that like I just kind of overlooked it. Now I'm like, oh no, like maybe that's a me thing. Like versus some books where I'm like, No, who read this? But
Yeah. So, and I'm gonna need your help because I know you right before this you helped.
oh yeah,
You listened to how to pronounce Hanna's last name, but this is another book that was not on my radar at all.
yeah,
And that is The End of Drum Time
yeah. But
by
Hanna Pylvainen.
Pylvainen.
Yeah.
Um, I again not this is not in my like was not on my radar at all. Historical fiction once
Mm-hmm.
again. Lots of stuff set in like the 1800s, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. But this is in mid 1800s. It's set in a Scandinavian village.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff about like people of a certain religion coming into another group and trying to convert on this list this year as well.
Mm-hmm.
But a Lutheran minister comes into an indigenous reindeer herder community and tries to change them. One of the people does convert, and his son winds up in a relationship with the guy who is trying to convert them, daughter. That makes sense. And they try to save this reindeer herd that is like dwindling. So I have to say, like, the cover of this book is so 1980s to me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm having such a hard time with it. But I love the idea. I don't know anything about this time period in this area.
It's so funny because when I saw the cover, I thought about and this is not, I don't want this to sound shady because it's not like, but it did kind of remind me of like some of the older Oprah's Book Club books.
Uh-huh.
Which, like, listen, I love a lot of those books, but that is like the vibe I was getting, and I was like, oh, is this like deep into the ocean? I don't know, like, you know.
But I will say, so Julia Phillips, who wrote Disappearing Earth, which was a finalist years ago, which I loved,
Yeah.
she blurbed this. Anthony Mara, who I am a huge fan of, and Yi Yoon Lee, did I say that right?
Uh-huh.
She also, so those are three big blurbs for me.
Yeah.
So I need to put my bias aside. And I'm often one who can take the cover off of a hardback and put away what I think about the cover. But this would not be a book that I would ever pick up for myself. And that I appreciate about the National Book Award.
No, I completely agree. That's what, like, and that's the thing. I do, like, I love discovering a book that I otherwise would not have read because there are, every year, there's at least 2 or 3. Like, there's that book, Dark at the Crossing, like, that was on a list back in 2017.
Something, right?
Ackerman.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not think that was a book I would love. Loved it. There was that, there's, I don't know, every year there's like, especially books about war. I always think I don't like books about war, and then I become like that. That was actually a collection last year. I really, The Haunting of Haji Hotak. Is that what that one?
Yeah, that made the short list too, right?
Yeah, and I actually ended up really liking that one. So yeah.
Yeah. The next book on this list is one of my most anticipated reads of the entire year, because We the Animals is one of my favorite reads ever. Like, I adore that book. So Justin Torres, Blackouts. This book actually comes out in October. I think. Like October 10th. I know that you've read this one, so let me hand it over to you a little bit, because it's a hard book to describe.
Yeah. Okay, this is gonna sound so weird, but if anyone has seen Apocalypse Now, the image I have in my mind while I was reading the book, I just kept thinking about Marlon Brando and what's his name? Oh gosh, Sheen. Martin Sheen.
Martin Sheen, yeah.
Yeah, I just kept imagining those two people sitting in the dark towards the end of the movie. I don't know why. That's no one else is gonna see that in their heads. But anyway, it's about this like old man and this young guy. They're like going through this book that's like a history of queerness, I think. And it's kind of, but there's like a lot of stuff that's been blacked out. I don't know. I also went into this one with like not knowing much. But I don't know how to describe. This is hard to describe. I'm not good at summarizing books.
Yeah, no. So I do know So there's like this, they met, I think, in a mental health facility,
Uh-huh.
the older man and the young man. There is some sort of sexual relationship between the
Yeah.
two of them. The old man is ill and is sort of at the end of his life and is
Mhm.
like passing off this research that he's been doing about this text he found. And what is so fascinating, it's like a textbook, but the copy that he's found has been blacked out. Like lots of it has been
Right.
redacted, which turns a lot of what you read from that into almost like poetry.
Mhm.
So this book is the most, in my opinion, I haven't read them all, but having flipped through enough of them, it's the most daring when it comes to style
Yeah.
or syntax or
Form.
presentation on the page.
Yeah.
Um, I still don't know what I think about it. Like I loved it. I thought it
Mhm.
was brilliant, but it is a complicated book.
Yeah. It's so funny because when I read it, I thought, ooh, this would have been a good Booker book. I don't know if it'll make the long list for the National Book Award, but it's one of those that I'm pleasantly surprised to make it because I enjoyed it. I thought it was really exciting to read on some people don't love uh something that's like demanding a little bit more from you as a reader, but
Uh-huh.
I always enjoy that. And so I think that the risks he's taking formally is really exciting. Once again, and I should also clarify, I don't know what some of these authors like. We should never objectify people anyway. But Justin Torres, I think, is also he could get it, you know. So respectfully, if he, if you're watching, I'm ready.
Oh, um,
Yeah.
yes. So yes, Justin Torres is a very handsome man. I will say what I thought was most interesting once he was nominated is
Mhm.
I didn't realize how important he has been in the life of many authors. A
Yeah.
lot of very like authors that I really respect talk about him as a teacher and talk about him as someone who is really inspired. And I
Mhm.
think that's really amazing for a man who really has only at this point published a novella.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited. I have been dying for him to publish something else, and this book is very daring. It's like a very big risky second book. He could have stayed very true to form.
Yeah.
And there's always sort of a part of him in all of his books as well. Um, I don't know. Of all the books on the list, I think it's the one that does the most things different, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. So I'm hoping that it does well just because I'm such a fan of his. So
Fingers crossed.
yeah. Last but certainly not least is Holler Child by LaToya Watkins, Dr. LaToya Watkins. I just always put that out there. Now, Hunter, I don't know if you know this, but she had a novel come out a couple years ago called Perish, which I loved and no one talked about. Tiny Rep Books sent it to me. I read it. It is dark and it is a lot of trauma in it, but I
Mhm.
thought it was absolutely brilliant. And so when she had a new collection coming out, I was so excited. I actually read this one yesterday, y'all. So, and it's it's a lot about the Black experience in West Texas.
Okay.
And it is like there's a lot of darkness to it.
Mhm.
A lot of dogs in this book, and some of them get hurt. So be ready for that. I always put that out there because that's such a trigger for me. My husband hates it. If a dog gets like hurt in a movie, I will get up and walk out, and I won't finish the movie. I have no patience. But I will say this story collection is so good, Hunter. I think you're gonna love it.
It looks like one like that. This is one of the ones that just based off of the title and cover alone, I was like, oh, this looks like a book that I'm gonna love. Does this cover not remind you a little bit of Heads of the Colored People?
100%. And the stories are very different. I think these are much more set in like a reality. Heads of the Color people had a little bit more fantasy to them.
Yes.
But
Okay.
I remember reading that short story collection and going, "What? Why don't I know who this author is? She is freaking
Yeah.
amazing." So I'm hoping that a lot of people pick up Holler Child and the importance of a comma. I just love how important the comma is here. Um, because I think LaToya Watkins, she's a professor at a university outside of Dallas.
Mhm.
Um, and she never really leaves Texas for any of her tour. And I'm like, please come to California. I really want to see you in person. I just think it's so good. So there's 2 short story collections on the list. I haven't read the other one, but I may be biased. So those are the 10 books on the list.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm cautiously optimistic about this list. I'm more excited about it than I was for last year's list, because last year's list, I am so sorry, but I do not remember half of those books. I think I liked 3 of them, and the rest I could kind of give or take. Which, like, no like, and to be clear, I always want to say this, like, I never want to take away from anyone's like their joy that they have of getting on this list. I think that is a very big deal, and I think that's very exciting. And while these books may not work for me, while I may not understand their merits, sometimes I also go back, like, if I don't like a book, I'll go back and reread it in a couple of years and be like, oh, I was wrong. So yeah.
So I think I ask this at the end of this video every year, Hunter, but if you, just based on what we know and what we talk about, had to pick a winner, who do you think's the front runner walking in this list so far?
Let me think. Okay, like, so I feel like if they want to be riskier, they could do Blackouts.
Yes.
But I feel like, and I know I seemed lukewarm on this, but just because of the audiobook, but like, I feel like if they want to be, I would not be surprised if this won Chain AllStars, because it does seem like the kind of book. Those would be the 2 that I would probably be least surprised to see win as of right now.
Yeah, I will say in the last couple of years, The Friend by Sigrid Nunez and Interior Chinatown, both books that were formulaic or structurally very different, right? And they went on to win. And I think they are books that people may have just glossed over otherwise. And they were both extremely powerful. Books that are just like a more straightforward narrative, they've won a couple times. I mean, last year's winner, The Rabbit Hutch, right, was much more straightforward. And it's I just don't know. It'll be interesting. Isn't the author of Interior Chinatown on the committee this year?
Yeah, actually, I think so. Yeah,
I think he is. So it will be interesting. Yes, I do think that Chain AllStars. I also think we cannot count out the other Eden. I think that the other Eden, like The Friend by Sigrid Nunez, is a writer's book. Like, writers love it, and that always adds power to its potential.
Yeah, I will say, I am really hoping. I'm just like, this is not a threat, but I'm hoping that these books are all better than Ward and Groff's, or else over.
I just want the 5 that get to the short list to be pretty stellar. That's there's always a couple of books on the long list that I'm like, I feel like they just want to make sure that these smaller publishers, or maybe these authors that aren't as known, get some notice, and that is completely fine. I think that is part of what it does. But the 5 that make the shortlist better be pretty darn phenomenal. So we'll be back together to talk about what we think of the long list and pick our shortlist. It's not that long. We don't have that long to read these books.
That's fine. I've been listening to audiobooks more, so hopefully I'll be on it.
Yes. Well, Hunter, thank you so much. I really enjoy when you come to visit me.
Yeah, it's always so fun. Thank you.
And we will be back. We'll have 2 more videos in this series, like we do every year, where we talk about our shortlist, and then we will dissect the shortlist and pick a winner. So as always, until next time, I wish you happy reading. Bye, everyone.